I don't think I need to introduce Dr. Ghosh any more than I can, actually, because he has been an author who has gotten many awards. He has written many best-selling books. I think he has been writing for more than 30 years now, right? Dr. Ghosh? Yes. And he has written books like Hungry Tides, Sea of Poppies, which was a trilogy. And now we are here to talk about his latest book, which is about to come out, called Jungle Nama. It's a spin-off from Hungry Tide.
Yes, this is an adaptation. Jungle Nama is an adaptation of a folk tale from the Sunderbans in Bengal. It's a story that I got interested in when I was writing The Hungry Tide. But it's a story that's well known really across Bengal. Most Bengalis are familiar with the story.
So I had read Hungry Tide a long time ago when I was actually in college. So I had to refresh my memory. But I think in that book, this story comes in where they go to watch a performance, right? And then essentially that is how the story begins, more or less, I would say. Like how that one folklore sort of repeats itself. Is that correct to put it?
Yes, the story of Bondidi is very important in The Hungry Tide. As you say, the performance is a very important part of the story. So the story of Bondidi exists in many different forms in the Sundarban. It's a story that people tell to each other. It's a story that's, printed texts of the story also exist. And it's also performed. And,
Right.
different parts, different tellings of the story emphasize different aspects of it.
So is this the first time you've done this? Like, I think it's a poem then, essentially, right? A long poem.
Yes, it's a long epic poem. It's not that long.
Yeah.
It's, I think, altogether like 50 pages or something. But, I feel hesitant in calling it a poem because it's not poetry in the modern sense, It's a story told in verse. It's something which is how stories were always told in India. They were always told in verse. So instead of calling it poetry, I would actually prefer to call it kavya.
To make a very weird reference, and apologies in advance, Dr. Ghosh, but if you have seen Gunda by Mithun Chakravarti, that is also a poem. I consider that a poem because all the dialogues are rhyming and the entire movie is a giant poem. But
Wow, I didn't know that.
random aside, if you watch it, please disclaimer, it's cringy. It's extremely cringy. Yeah. I saw one of your interviews where you say that I think Gun Island, you had written Gun Island, and it happened that you started writing an article or an essay and it turned into a book. Tell me, how does your process work? Like, how do you come upon these ideas?
I'm sure as a writer yourself, you know that it sometimes happens that you can't actually predict how these things
That's true.
work out. You start doing one thing and it turns into something else and then something else. And you just don't know how it comes about. So I wouldn't say that there's any kind of predictable process as such, I think the one thing that I can say about the process is that I don't believe in writer's block.
Oh,
Not that I haven't sometimes felt that I have a writer's block. It's just that usually it's just being tired. You just have to sometimes when you're pushing yourself, when you're pushing too hard, that's when it becomes. That's when you begin to feel that you're stuck. What you really need to do is to just do something to loosen up, just to loosen your brain.
What you feel about the Sunderbans, and how would you describe it? And also how important traveling is for you to come up with these stories.
Well, traveling has been a very important part of my life, just by accident, really, because I grew up in various different places and somehow always found myself traveling. If you look at the forests of the Himalaya, they're not unlike the forests of the Nilgiris or the forests on the other side of the Himalaya also. But the Sundarban is a completely unique and extraordinary landscape.
It was so crazy last year when the whole migration happened, like the migrant crisis happened, where people went from cities to back to their villages, it sort of made you realize how many people have migrated to the cities, and in such large droves. And now, because the cities were closed down, they were going back. So many people are flocking to more urban areas, right? Do you think one of the reasons is also climate change?
The amazing thing is that the only people who seem to have been unaware that that there are millions of migrants living in Bombay, Delhi, across the West Coast, all the big cities, is the government.
Yeah.
The government enacted this lockdown without making any provision for these migrants. Which is, I mean, it was an absolute catastrophe. Because many of them, as you know, live in shacks and shanties in the cities, and they earn daily wages. So without daily wages, they're completely helpless. They have no support. They're cut off from their support systems. So, it was an absolute catastrophe.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just completely horrifying. They have nowhere to be. And if they're out on the streets, then the police come and beat them.
Mufat khoro, muft mein itna hi milega. To watch the full unedited interview, you have to subscribe to News Laundry and pay to keep news free. Because when the public pays, the public is served. We depend on you and not on advertisers. So go to www.newslaundry.com/subscription and subscribe and get all our unedited interviews, our special video shows, comics, and everything that's behind the paywall. Remember, to subscribe to News Laundry, you pay just about 10 rupees a day. That's less than, a cigarette. And smoking is injurious to health. So subscribe and watch the full interview.
I mean, nowadays, I get like every morning I wake up and there are like 3 or 4 manuscripts in my inbox, waiting to be read. How can I possibly read all these books that people keep sending? And they keep telling me, "Oh, you said there wasn't enough writing about climate change, so now you read my book."
Do you think that relationship of fiction with climate change has changed in the last 5 years? Do you see any changes?
Yes, I think things have really changed since I wrote The Great Derangement. The Great Derangement came out in 2016, but I think there was a major shift in global consciousness in 2018.
I think Binil wants me to ask you this. Why did you move from anthropology to fiction?
I was an accidental anthropologist. When I was in 2021, I was really eager to travel abroad. In those days, it wasn't like it is today. I also disagree, with this latest UN report on climate migration. I think anyone who looks at this phenomenon of migration carefully will recognize that you can't actually just characterize it as a single thing. It's many different aspects of the planetary crisis. This is not about some marginal aspect of the world. This is the reality that we live in. It's all around us.
Thank you for doing this for us. Thank you for spending time with us.